Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 3T Path channel, and welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now, in the last 3 classes, we went through this beautiful list of qualities of a saintly person, qualities of a perfectly realized yogi. Very important classes. And in this class, we're going to have a very interesting section as well, where Krishna is going to list Bhakti practices, practices of devotion, which will lead us through these higher stages of consciousness. And before we start that list, there's going to be another verse from Krishna that's very interesting as well, which kind of explains religiosity around the world in general. Now, if you want to watch the previous classes, this is already the 46th class of this course. So if you want to access the entire Uddhava-gita course, then become a member of this channel, and the instructions on how to do that are here in the description of the video. So let's get started. We are in the 11th canto, 11th chapter, starting with verse 33. So this is a very interesting verse which explains religiosity around the world. Krishna says, "My devotees may or may not know exactly what I am, who I am, or how I exist. But if they worship me with unalloyed love, then I consider them to be the best of devotees." So this helps us understand why there are so many different religions around the world. And it's not like, some of the more fanatical members of such religions might think like, oh, only my religion works and yours doesn't. Yours will lead to hell. Only mine has the answer. And this verse explains, look, no, it's not like that, because Krishna is a person. He loves you. He's your father, your mother, and your grandfather. So out of love, you don't require people to know things. What you only care about is the love itself. The example the spiritual masters give is that of the child, the little infant, the baby, crying out for his mother or father. So the baby is just making noises, is just crying. He's not saying the name of the mother, or what to speak of pronouncing it correctly. He doesn't know anything about the mother or the father, or who they are, or how they exist. He doesn't know anything. He's just crying out in love. And then the parents respond in love just the same. They don't expect such knowledge of themselves to be able to love the children. And of course, God is like that as well. So all these different religions, they, sometimes they're very vague concepts of God, and they don't really understand exactly, like they don't know who God is, or what God is, or how he exists. They don't, it's not clear, because their traditions don't have this kind of detailed knowledge, which, fortunately we have here, which are available for everyone in such texts as this Uddhava-gita and Bhagavad-gita, and of course the entire Bhagavad Purana and such. So we have access to this, but others don't, but yet they feel the love and they feel the transformation, and God loves them too and accepts their love, as he's saying here. So it's a very nice devotee, emphasizing the power of bhakti. Bhakti is of course, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, is the highest yogic practice is bhakti yoga. So yoga with devotion. The devotion is the highest, most powerful spiritual practice. And Krishna is emphasizing that in this verse, before going to the next verse, where we're going to have this beautiful list of bhakti practices Krishna is going to give us. Now, let me just read this interesting purport here for this verse left by the previous acharyas. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, although Yavan indicates that Lord Krishna cannot be limited by time or space, he becomes limited by the love of his pure devotees. For example, Lord Krishna never steps 1 foot out of Vrindavan because of the intense love of its inhabitants for him. In this way, the Lord becomes under the control of his devotees' love. The word Ya indicates that Krishna is the absolute truth, who appears as the son of Vasudeva or as Shyama Sundar. Yadrisha indicates that the Lord is Atma Rama, or completely self-satisfied, and also Apta Kamma, one who automatically fulfills all of his desires. Still, being affected by the love of his devotees, the Lord sometimes appears to be anatmarama, or dependent on the love of his devotees. And anaptakama, unable to achieve his desire without the cooperation of his devotees. This is all love, and of course the Vaishnava, the Bhakti, the Vaishnava gurus, they love emphasizing this sweet relationship of love between God and soul, which is the essence, of course, of Vaishnavism. So at this level, is God needing he doesn't need the devotees, of course he doesn't need, but out of love, that need arises just to churn the love more. Actually, the Supreme Lord Krishna is always independent, but he reciprocates the intense love of his devotees and thus appears to be dependent on them, just as he apparently became dependent on Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda during his childhood pastimes in Vrindavan. The word agyatva, inexperience, lacking knowledge, indicates that sometimes a devotee may not have a proper philosophical understanding of the personality of Godhead, or due to love may temporarily forget the Lord's position. In Bhagavad-gita 11:41, Arjuna says, Saketi matra prasabam yaduktam Krishna yadava saketi ajanata mahimanam tavedam maya pramadat pranayena vapi. I have in the past addressed you as, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, without knowing your glories. Please forgive me, whatever I may have done in madness or in love. It's a beautiful verse from Gita. This is in chapter 11. So Krishna, has been explaining his position, and then in chapter 11 he showed his universal form, Virat Rupa, and Arjuna is like, seeing all this. So at the end of this manifestation is so, scary, impressive, and so he's like, whoa, and I was just calling you my friend, and Krishna, hey, buddy, and like, oh, I'm sorry for that, it's just out of love or madness that I was, but of course, that's what Krishna wants. Krishna wants that intimacy, but, Arjuna's like, oh, scared of that. So that's a good example of like a, perfect devotee like Arjuna, quote unquote, forgetting Krishna's position. Arjuna's words, ajanata mahimanam, have the same meaning as Krishna's words, agyatva mam, in this verse of the Bhagavatam. Both indicate incomplete understanding of Krishna's glories. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, pranayena, his forgetfulness of Krishna's supreme position was caused by his love for him. In this verse, Krishna excuses such lapses on the part of his devotees with the words agyatva mam, which indicate that even though devotees may not fully appreciate his exalted position, Krishna accepts their loving service. Thus, this verse clearly reveals the supreme position of bhakti. Like Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita 11:54, Bhakti tva anyaya shakya aham eva vidorjana gyatum drashtum cha tatvena pravishtum cha parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service, bhakti, can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So, of course, this is one of the themes of Bhagavad Gita, in general, all the Bhakti tradition, that to understand, to have this knowledge of Krishna requires Bhakti. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, also chapter 10, like, when you have this Bhakti towards me, I give you Jnana Yoga, so that you can come to me. So it's, with devotion you get the knowledge, and with the knowledge you get more devotion, which then you get more knowledge. It's a virtual cycle of gradually more and more knowledge and devotion towards Krishna. Anyone may develop innumerable saintly qualities. Without love of Krishna, one will not achieve complete success. One must understand the personality of Godhead as He is and love Him. Even if one is not capable of analytically understanding the position of God, if one simply loves Krishna, then one is certainly perfect. Many of the residents of Vrindavan had no idea that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor did they know of Krishna's potencies and incarnations. They simply loved Krishna with their hearts and souls, and therefore they are considered most perfect. So beautiful commentary on this verse. And now let's get to this beautiful list, on the topic of devotion. So how do I increase my devotion? How do I work? So Krishna's going to give us an excellent, amazing list of devotional practices here. Let's hear about them. So this is verse. Now we're in verses 34 to 41. Okay. So this is a big paragraph, so bear with me. My dear Uddhava, one can give up false pride and prestige by engaging in the following devotional activities. So it's interesting that that's the prelude of the list. What's Bhakti going to do for you? It's going to help you give up false pride and prestige. Because what's that? It's all about you. False pride and prestige is me. Egoism. In modern languages, we could say ego. I always explain to my students that the spiritual path is a path of going from egoism, where it's all about you, to theism, where it's all about God. Simple. You're going from egoism to theism. Because egoism is an illusion. Because egoism means that ego-centered, that you are the center of reality. My ego, I am the center, ego-centered. Which is an illusion, because you're not. You might have noticed this by now. You're not the center of reality. Sorry to, disappoint you if you still thought you were, but you're not. But God is the center of reality. So theocentric, theism makes sense. Egocentric, egoism is an illusion. And this illusion, it leads to sadness and mistakes and suffering. And theism, which is a reality, leads to satisfaction and bliss, because that's the truth. You're aligned with reality. So that's the way he starts preludes this list. Okay, so the first item of the list, and it's all about, the focus here is going to be a lot on altar temples and deities, because this is a simple thing you can do in Bhakti. It's very easy. Easily accessible. So first thing is that one may purify oneself by seeing, touching, worshipping, serving, and offering prayers of glorification and obeisances to my form as the deity and to my pure devotees. So very important. I tell my students, look, because in the West people have a hard time with deities. Now why, let's just stop here and make a little paragraph here. Why do people have a hard time with deities? It's very simple, because all the other religious traditions, the Western religion, the Abrahamic traditions, they don't have deities, right? Why? Because they don't have a description of God. Like we just saw in the last verse, there's nothing wrong. If you love God, God is going to love you and think you're the best devotee. So that's fine. It's not a question of, but they don't have knowledge of who God is, what God is, and how He exists. It's a vague concept of God. So you can't have a deity of a vague concept of God. You can't make a concept, But deities were there. So what happened is, when Christianity entered the Western culture, when it took birth, it entered into a culture of the Romans and the ancient Roman Greeks, and they all had deities, because people have always had deities. Deities are very normal. Right? People have always had deities because people were basically worshiping the nature gods. And with the nature gods, you have deities as well. Because it's just it's a perfectly normal thing to have a deity of your object of devotion. Right? It's just obvious. It's just like an easy thing. You put the altar, it's there, you can offer, you can do all these things. It just connects you with that deity. So it's a very natural, easy, important thing. It's important, you know. So of course, because people were just worshiping the nature gods, like in the popular Vedic religion as well, at the time of Krishna, people were doing this too in India, you know, in Southeast Asia, all over the world. So people had their little, you know, they were worshipping their sun god and rain god and this and that. So they had deities. They've always had deities. Now, the difference is with the Vedic tradition is that the concept of the Supreme Lord, yoga, which is what we're studying, which we follow, of course, teachings of Krishna. So yoga, this worship of the transcendental Supreme Lord, it comes not as an you know, like stepping on, you know, the religion of the Vedic religion of worshiping the demigods, but as a more intelligent alternative. So in Bhagavad-gita, you'll see Krishna twice telling Arjuna, chapter 7 and chapter 9, that look, Arjuna, it's more intelligent. He uses the word, it's just like, think about it. It's a philosophical argument. Why would you worship, you know, any demigod? Why would you worship any nature god? Why would you worship Indra? I gave Indra all his power. Worship me instead. Come to me. You know, why talk to the middleman? Cut the middleman out. Come straight to me. It's much better for you because you'll get better results. You're directly at the source. So it's a philosophical argument. So you don't have to hate anyone who worships Indra. You don't have to mock them or cut their heads off, because it's like, okay, you just have to maybe try to explain to them that there's something better. So you offer them knowledge and philosophy. But unfortunately, when Christianity entered the Roman Greek culture, the ancient Roman culture, it didn't really use such arguments. It started, in the beginning they were trying to say, but then it started getting heavy. And so they were saying, look, basically, you're with us or you're against us. They started to develop this hardcore, like, you're with us or you're against us. So, and then of course, as soon as they gain power, you're with us or you're dead. Like, get with the program or get killed. So that was the major, that's how Christianity spread, and of course, unfortunately, Islam as well. Like, you're with us or you're dead. So which one would you prefer? The sword or, Anyway, so as they started advancing, if you had a deity, that meant you were in the wrong thing. You were doing the pagan worship. You were doing the nature worship, the nature gods, or the city god, or whatever. And so that was the wrong thing. So the deity was connected as the wrong thing. That was the destruction. You're going to hell. You just got it wrong. So the deity was negative. And after 2,000 years of this in the West, so they're like, we had this, and of course with Islam, it took even a step further. No, you can't even make an image even of the prophet, because it's like, oh, it's so offensive, because matter, there's also like a bit of this Gnostic philosophy of like, matter versus spirituality, where matter is evil. So there was like a Gnosticism, at the time of Jesus, this concept of matter being the creation of an evil God. So this is like really, matter is disgusting. And yet in the Vedic tradition, Bhagavad-gita, what does Krishna say? Matter is my energy. So that we have this understanding, this is all Krishna's energy as well. So it's not disgusting at all. It's also Krishna's energy. But in the, with Abrahamic traditions, that wasn't a developed concept. So matter was kind of gross, kind of, evil, maybe the product of an evil god. And then there was no deity. So then, of course, the whole concept of deities was, taboo. And so when this tradition, now we come back to the West, now Vedic tradition coming to the West, people are like, oh, no, deity, oof. Because they have like 2,000 years of PTSD, like, ooh, this is not good, like this is like this, like, collective memory of, like, oh, no, we don't want any deities. But of course, once you get over that and you understand that, one, all matter is God's energy. So therefore, doing a form out of matter, doing God's form out of matter is not offensive at all because it's His energy anyway. And two, you have information on God. You do know what He looks like. So therefore, you can make the image. So we have these two great advantages in the Vedic tradition, which the Abrahamic tradition don't have. That's why we have deities. And of course, everybody can have deities of God now. Now, once you have the deity of God, so that's, it really, you don't have to have it. It's not like I tell my students, it's not like a nest, because I know they have they're overcoming all these, this collective memory. So it's, you don't have to have a deity of God, of Krishna at home. And in my case, I have a deity of Nrsingadev, which is another form of God. You don't have to have it. You don't have to go to the temple, but it's nice. It really makes it much easier. It really makes it much easier, because again, it's like Krishna saying here, you worship, you're serving, you're touching, you're seeing, you're doing prayers, you're doing obeisance. So I wake, I can offer my obeisance, I can offer flowers here, I can change the water, I can clean. It's like I'm doing all this stuff. I can do these things. And these purify your mind and connect you with Krishna. So it's very nice. And interesting, Krishna says, to my deity form and my pure devotees. Which is it's a concept of love, a principle, a transcendental, ever-existing principle of love is that when you serve someone that is loved by someone else, they will love you more for it. So if you go to a person and you serve their children or even their pet, they'll like you more than if you try to serve them directly. Right? It's just a principle of love. Because if you love your children, if you love your pet, then you'll be happier seeing your child, your pet, being loved, being served, than you're yourself. Okay, so Krishna says that. So the devotees are Krishna's servants. So if you serve the servant, then Krishna is more pleased than if you try to serve him directly. Okay, so that's very nice. So that's a temple, and he's going to go on. Later he's going to talk more about the temple and festivals, etc. But so the concept of the deity, which you can have at home, or a deity you have in the temple if you have more people in the community who are into the same spiritual line. Now this is really important. This next one is absolutely important, absolutely the highest practice of Bhakti Yoga. So pay attention to this. One should also glorify my transcendental qualities and activities. Hear with love and faith the narrations of my glories and constantly meditate on me. This is it. This is the epicenter of Bhakti Yoga. This is what it's all about. To always meditate on Krishna, to hear Shravanam Kirtan, hear these, of course, the teachings, the narrations, the activities. Of course, the entire Bhagavad Purana is all about that. That's why you should swim in the Bhagavad Purana daily. Your life should have a constant Bhagavad Purana consciousness, because the whole beautiful text, over 14,000 verses. They say 18,000, but when you count them anyway, it's 14,000 something. They're all about the narrations of the glories and pastimes and activities of God. So very wonderful. So very important. So this is it, because this is connecting your mind directly to Krishna in yoga. Yoga means connecting your mind to the Supreme, to the transcendence. God is the highest aspect of transcendence. And devotion is the highest level of quality. So when you connect your mind in devotion to God, then you are in the highest level of yogic practicing, and you're highly purifying yourself, very quickly, intensely purifying yourself. Very powerful practice. So very important. And now, back to festivals and temples. So now the rest is like this. One should always discuss my birth and activities and enjoy life by participating in festivals such as Janmashtami, which glorify my pastimes. So of course, talking about Krishna especially, is supremely important. If you want to focus, direct your mind towards Krishna, which you should, then, then specifically, and not all, focus on Krishna's pastimes. The 10th canto of the Bhagavad Purana is where you'll find all that nectar. So then, of course, Janmashtami and festivals, and that just connects you to that love. In my temple, one should also participate in festivals and ceremonies by singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, and discussing me with other Vaishnavas. So just in general, if you can get, you don't have to, but if you can get together and have fun, and celebrate God, then these things are very nice. One should observe all the regularly celebrated annual festivals by attending ceremonies, pilgrimages, and making offerings. Okay, so just a general, like all these religious festive events, it's something you can easily do because it involves your body. You're going with your body, so it's fun and it's different and it satisfies your social needs as well. So it's all very easy and nice. One should also observe religious vows such as Ekadashi. So Ekadashi, I've been practicing since the last century, and it's nice, it gives you a focus. It's like a little extra thing. Again, these aren't like, oh no, you have to do Ekadashi. But again, these are bonus. This will give you more. It's like a little more you can do. So you can do Ekadashi, it's easy, you just follow it, see the calendar, and you just, we do the simple Ekadashi Prabhupada left us, we just eliminate grains and legumes, it's not so hard, and then it's something extra for you to do. And by taking, he just mentions the Vedic, and he says, and then by doing tantric and Vedic initiations, dikshas. So it's not the diksha of this modern idea of officiating your devotion to a guru in a ceremony, which they call it. They never did that before. You never had to officially celebrate your devotion to a guru. That wasn't done. This is a recent thing in Vaishnava tradition. But here is just a Vedic, like Krishna says, tantric and Vedic dikshas. So not, maybe it's like festival things that you would do, that you would involve, and because the diksha was used in rituals. In Vedic rituals. Okay, next thing. One should faithfully and lovingly support the installation of my deity, and individually or in cooperation with others, one should work for the construction of Krishna conscious temples and cities, as well as flower gardens, fruit gardens, and special areas to celebrate my pastime. So just in general, you just make the world Krishna-centric, God-centric, of course. The Christian tradition did that beautifully, right? With just amazing cathedrals dominating the cities. That was so important, isn't it? That really directed people's attentions. These beautiful spires and amazing architecture. And to this day, you walk into a cathedral, it's like, wow, it just inspires. And of course, beautiful temples all over Southeast Asia. So of course, these things they're nice because, we're like physical level. People are like in a mundane physical level. So when they walk into a temple, it's like a physical, it gives that physical force to help their minds and their hearts be directed properly. So it's very important. Of course, if you can, if it's possible. Again, these things, you don't have to have this. Where I live, there's nothing in my town. There's, this little town here in Wales. There's nothing. It's fine, But I have my own temple. So what I tell my students is that because of the way life is today, we're kind of pressed for time, right? It's a bit of a time crunch for everyone. Better than just having a temple, going to a temple, because it's usually you end up just going there never, you go there maybe on Sundays for a little while, but for a few hours. It's much better just to have it in your house, because then your house is a temple. Because actually you're a temple, right? Because Krishna is in your heart. So you're a temple. That's the most important thing to understand. And then if you can make your house a temple, That's really nice too. So you can have like a little altar in your house. And then you have that all day long, all day, every day, you have that with you. And that's much more impactful than visiting a temple, once in a while for a fest. But that's nice as well, if that's what, I've done that already as well, lots. These days, I just prefer having it. As I talk with older devotees, as you see like more mature devotees, they prefer just having like their thing at home, because then it's like their contact is constant, and then they personally serve the deity and they can do all these things themselves and not just observe from far away and give a donation. Anyway, so that's just a suggestion if you want to do that. Okay, one should consider oneself. This is nice. Okay, now more philosophical, spiritual. This is very important. One should consider oneself to be my humble servant. Of course, that's the whole point of devotion. Without duplicity, and thus should help to clean the temple, which is my home. First, one should sweep and dust thoroughly, then one should further cleanse with water and cow dung. Having dried the temple, one should sprinkle scented water and decorate the temple with mandalas. One should thus act just like my servant. Of course, then the real point is that you understand that you are a loving servant of God. A devotee should never advertise his devotional activities. Therefore, his service will not be the cause of false pride. And Jesus gave that same recommendation, because that happens. You start getting into the whole point is so you not to be egocentric, not to be about yourself, but to be about God. So then, if you start, and then people are like, oh, so it's all about you again, So it's a trap of material nature you have to be careful of. Now, some suggestions of how to deal with paraphernalia, the deity paraphernalia. One should never use lamps that are offered to me for other purposes simply because there is need of illumination. So you can't use altar stuff. So one of the rules, that's because little rules, but one of the concepts you have to understand about having an altar is that, things are just for the altar, God first. So you don't it's not like you have something at the altar and you use it. Sometimes we're going to use it for something else, and they use it for no, you just use specifically, you leave for the altar, and the other things, are other things. You separate, so you don't share like that. But you do share the things you've offered to Krishna, like the flowers. Then later, when you take them off the altar, then you share them, and that's called prasad. You get the Lord's mercy, because now you're getting this divine flower, this divine water sprinkled on your head, etc. Okay. And one should never offer to me anything that has been offered to or used by others. So of course, first you offer to Krishna, then you share it, and not the other way around. Whatever is most desired by one within the material world, and whatever is most dear to oneself, one should offer that very thing to me. Such an offering qualifies one for eternal life. So here's a final suggestion Krishna has. Look, whatever you think is most dear, offer that to me. And in fact, what's the message of the Bhagavad-gita? Offer your whole life to Krishna, because your life is dear to Krishna, right? Your family life, your work life, your very existence, your health, all these things are dear to your house, your money. So offer your whole life to Krishna, all right? Krishna says, whatever you do, whatever you eat, do that as an offering unto me. This is the very concept, root of all bhakti. This is the essence of Bhagavad-gita in a nutshell. Just make your life, beautiful life in Dharma, do that as an offering unto Krishna. And that's what I love to do, and I love to teach. It is such a simple, beautiful, gorgeous concept. This is true spirituality, where your life isn't separated anymore. Like I have this thing and I have my, spiritual life and religious life. No. Your life is your spiritual life, is your loving offering to Krishna. So that's it. Beautiful list to get us connected in bhakti. I hope you enjoy that, and have the rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love.